I want to thank Kevin Daddy for becoming my latest subscriber. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. So Lockdown took place at the Alamo Dome in San Antonio, Texas. Great visual to see that large of a crowd there. It was a new attendance record for TNA, so that was a very positive thing for the company. It started off with a X Division championship match. Kenny King defending against Christian York and Zema Ion in a three-way match. Good match. Kenny King retains the title. And now this is the time that TNA needs to bring in new contenders. It's been the same four people basically for the last several months. And in order to keep the X Division fresh, you have to give Kenny King new contenders. I mean, what happened to all those X Division wrestlers from last year that TNA had, who participated in that tournament which led up to Destination X, the tournament that happened there? What happened to all those guys? And why aren't those guys in TNA putting themselves in contention for the X Division title? Now, whoever they get, I'm not saying they have to get a title shot right away, but what I would like to see is have people brought in, one at a time and slowly built up, where eventually they get a shot at Kenny King. But they just cannot continue to just rotate the same people now. I know, why Rob Van Dam wasn't there, I don't know. I think there was something about his contract being up soon and he might, leave the company. I don't know. But they have to get new contenders in there. So the next match was Joseph Park against Joey Ryan. This was your, basic comedy match. Really had no interest in this. This is a match that could have been on Impact. So really, that's it. Then we had Bully Ray and Hogan's daughter backstage, and she's coddling him and wishing him luck and continuing to show why she should be doing those crappy sci-fi movies. At least I think she should be doing them, otherwise she wouldn't be there in TNA. But Hogan comes in to talk to Bully Ray, and once again Hogan refers to TNA as a good little company. I mean, can someone tell Hogan to stop doing that? Dixie, tell him to stop. But as he's talking to Bully Ray, he said something very interesting, saying that he was jealous and that he wishes it could be him that was getting the title shot. Now I thought about that and I said, very interesting, considering what would happen later on and considering previous comments that Hogan has made concerning the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. So then you had the Women's Championship Velvet Sky defending against Gail Kim. And this match seemed to be more about Gail Kim and Taryn Terrell more so than a title match between Velvet Sky and Gail Kim. They were, Gail Kim and Taryn Terrell were arguing with each other, before the match, and then of course during the match, Gail slaps Taryn Terrell, and then Taryn Terrell responds by spearing Gail Kim, and her extensions were coming out of her hair. Taryn Terrell's extensions. And Velvet Sky takes advantage and wins the match and retains the title. It's an okay match. I mean, this obviously was designed to establish the eventual program between Gail Kim and Taryn Terrell. Now, it provides a very interesting situation because it's been quite a while since there have been multiple storylines in the women's division. Usually it's just one singular story that's going on. Now, is TNA finally going to give them multiple storylines? Because if you have Gail Kim and Taryn Terrell going on, then who is Velvet Sky going to be facing? Now, many people keep talking about a possible Mickie James heel turn, but it's going to take time to build that. But what is she going to do until then? Because there's nobody for her to defend against. Tara, no. Brooke Tessmacher, you're not going to turn Brooke Tessmacher heel. Why? But wait. No, you're not going to put Madison Rayne in there against her. Because technically that's their only option. She's the only other heel that Velvet could go up against. Oh boy. But anyway, the next match was Robbie E against Rob Terry, and this was just a terrible match. Another match that really should have been on Impact. Didn't need to be on the pay-per-view. Just a very bad match. So then we had the World Tag Team Championship match. Three-way match. You had Robert Roode and Austin Aries defending against Chavo Guerrero and Hernandez, and also Christopher Daniels and Kazarian. Now let me take a detour for just a moment and address this supposed contract dispute that Robert Roode had. In 2009, Robert Roode signed a contract extension for 5 years, which means that his contract would not have expired until next year. And, I saw this on Sunday morning, and I was wondering, well, his contract doesn't expire until next year. How could it have expired now? And I even heard people say, well, he has an opt-out clause. Even if he had an opt-out clause, which I don't know if he did or not, but even if he did, that doesn't mean the contract expired. Opting out just simply means you're making the choice to leave the contract, get out of the contract. It doesn't mean the contract expired. I mean, Bruce Pritchard is a dick, but he's not a bumbling idiot. And TNA management, the issues I may have with them, they're not that ridiculously stupid enough to let this guy go from the company. No. All this was a work visa situation. Robert Roode is from Canada, and it was simply a work visa situation that he had to straighten out. The same thing happened to Angelina Love back in 2009. She also is from Canada, and she had issues with her visa. She had to leave the company. She worked that out, and then she returned. And that's all it was with Roode. It was never any dispute with a contract. So, back on the main road, Chavo Guerrero and Hernandez come out to cheers. Not surprising, because you're in San Antonio with a large Latino population. I mean, it would have been utterly ridiculous if they didn't get those cheers. And the way the match played out, it seemed that it was designed that way for Chavo and Hernandez to kind of drive the match so they could get over with the crowd, seeing as that they were in San Antonio, Texas. But what was interesting about it was that, you know how I feel about three matches, specifically for titles. But it seemed that Roode and Aries, they had their interactions, for a while, but those first several minutes, it was just Chavo Guerrero and Hernandez against Daniels and Kazarian, and Roode and Aries were just standing there. I mean, I thought a three-way match meant three guys were going, one from each team. But yet, Roode and Aries were kind of just, standing on the apron for that first several minutes. But it was a good match. And Robert Roode and Austin Aries retained the titles. And I think this should now end Chavo Guerrero and Hernandez pursuing the titles. I think that should be the end of that as far as they're concerned. And yes, eventually this will lead to that one match that everyone wants to jack off to. Likely will happen at Slammiversary. But in the meantime, they still need to go out and get some teams. Because I know some people still say they have a division. 2 teams is not a division. Now I say you need at least 6 teams to make a division. And at one time TNA did have 6 teams. They got to go out and rebuild this division. There are teams out there in the independents, or there are independent wrestlers that TNA can put together if they have chemistry with each other, and form a team and bring them in. But this would be the perfect time to do that while you're building up this potential match between Roode and Aries, Daniels and Kazarian. This would be the time. You have 3 months. This is the time now that you start bringing in those teams, because this is all they have now. So until then, take that time and bring in those teams. So then we had Taryn Terrell backstage with Jeremy Borash, and she's talking about why she got into it with Gail, and she couldn't take it anymore. And then Gail attacks her, and it barely lasted 3 seconds before it got broken up by Al Snow and Simon Diamond and some other production crew member. I wish that TNA could have just given Gail Kim 30 seconds. That's all she needed to just go to town on this chick and give her a "you don't know what you just got yourself into" beat down, rather than just have them barely touch each other for 3 seconds before they were separated. I would have liked to have seen Gail Kim just get 30 seconds and beat her ass. I mean, this woman cost Gail Kim a chance to win the title, and this was the time for Gail Kim to let that frustration out and perfectly set up what eventually is going to happen, rather than them just barely touching each other for 3 seconds. Okay. So then we had a cage match. Kurt Angle against Wes Briscoe. Now let's see. The 4 ways to win a cage match: pinfall, submission, climbing over the top of the cage, or going through the cage door. Well, I always thought that climbing over the top of a cage or going through the door is a pussy way of winning a match. Climbing over the top of a cage, all that means is you know how to climb. Walking through the cage door, does that mean you're better than your opponent? No, that just means you know how to walk through a door. I've always liked cage matches to be pinfall or submission, and that's it. But you should have added this stipulation: you can win the cage match by pinfall, submission, climbing over the top of the cage and landing on the floor, going through the cage door, or if you're small enough, crawling through those holes in the cages that the cameras shoot through, if you're small enough. Those ridiculous holes, man. Anyway, the match gets started, and during the match we hear chants of USA. It's always interesting to hear fans chant USA when Kurt Angle's opponent is also an American. But match was a little better than I expected. Kurt Angle accidentally clotheslines the referee. The referee goes down, and then he puts the ankle lock on Wes Briscoe. Wes Briscoe taps, but the referee is down. And then Angle gives Briscoe the angle slam, and then he walks outside of the cage, but then once again the referee is still down. Doesn't see that Angle's outside of the cage. And then he gets ambushed by D'Lo Brown. D'Lo Brown rams his head into the cage door. A cage door that seemed to be unlocked for the entire match. But D'Lo Brown throws Angle back into the ring, and then he grabs Wes Briscoe and drags Briscoe outside of the cage, and then he hides. And the referee finally gets to his feet and sees that Briscoe is outside of the cage, and that's it. Wes Briscoe wins. I know some people had an issue with that. How you gonna let this guy beat the legend? Well, I can see them doing this with the strategy of continuing this feud or rivalry or whatever you want to call it between Briscoe and Angle. If Angle wins the match, then that's it. There's nothing else to do. But by having Briscoe win the match, then you continue this. So I can understand why Wes Briscoe went over. So then you had the Lethal Lockdown match. Team TNA versus Aces and Eights. You know, the action was kind of, you know, blah. Crowd really wasn't into it. One interesting thing that happened during the match, you know, when Devon came down to the ring, he brought the TV championship belt with him. And I'm thinking, okay, well, he's obviously going to use this as a weapon, since you can have weapons in this match. And then before he goes into the cage, he just lays the TV title onto the ramp before going inside the cage. Now, what was the point of you bringing the belt if you're just gonna just slap it down on the ramp? But then the match obviously gets more active and the crowd gets livelier when Sting comes out with 2 garbage cans full of weapons. And the match, you know, gets more intense. Team TNA wins the match and Eric Young comes off the top of the cage with an elbow. And I'm fine with this, because considering what happens, this was probably the appropriate outcome. So then we get to the World Heavyweight Championship match. Jeff Hardy defending against Bully Ray. Now the match itself, as far as the action, was decent. Now at one point you have Wes Briscoe and Garrett Bischoff scaling the cage. They come inside the cage. And you have Jeff Hardy going at both of them, and Bully Ray was just kind of hanging back, and I know people were thinking, oh, okay, this is it. But then Bully Ray clotheslines both Bischoff and Briscoe, and then throws both of them out of that cage door. And then the match continues between the two of them. Then Hogan and Hogan's daughter come to the ring. And then members of Aces and Eights come to the ring. Now, I didn't even bother to question why Team TNA never came out. And I didn't really want to question the logic right there. I just wanted to just sit back and watch what was going to happen. So then members of Aces and Eights scale the cage again. They come inside, and Devon, being one of those members, throws a hammer to Bully Ray. Bully Ray hits Jeff Hardy from behind. And Hogan is stunned. Bully Ray makes the pinfall, and Bully Ray, not only the new World Heavyweight Champion, but the president of Aces and Eights. Now, we proceed to see the predictable overacting of Hogan's daughter before and during Bully Ray's time on the mic. Hogan, of course, repeats "no" a few times. And then Bully Ray starts talking, and he continues to taunt Hogan and Hogan's daughter. And then we see fans throwing bottles into the ring. Now, news has come out that TNA used plants to encourage fans to throw bottles into the ring. And a lot of TNA fans, from what I've seen online, have gotten really upset about that. TNA fans, calm down. So what if they used plants? It's not like every single person at ringside was a plant. I'm not going to piss on plants being used. Plants have been used in wrestling for years. And if there were a few people there to nudge fans to throw bottles into the ring, so what? It's not like every person at ringside was a plant. So fans were still throwing the bottles into the ring on their own. So it still came off legitimate, and it provided a visual image that was a perfect complement to the sight of Bully Ray in the ring, inside the cage, with the other members of Aces and Eights, with bottles on the mat, bottles still coming into the ring over the cage. It accomplished what it needed to accomplish. So even if you had some plants at ringside to nudge legit fans to throw those bottles, they still threw the bottles on their own. So it still came off legit. Just relax. And yes, someone inside the company probably, leaked that information out to these wrestling websites. Yes, that's always been a problem in wrestling. That's why wrestling is the way it is, because of information that keeps getting leaked out. And that's why we suddenly know all this information that we shouldn't know, but we do know, but because of these leaks. But just take a look at the visual image, and that's all that matters. Plants are not new, but it accomplished what it needed to accomplish, and that's all that matters. Now, the following may be unpleasant to listen to, and it may even make you a little nauseous, so try to stay with me. The way this situation has been laid out invites the possibility of Hogan taking advantage and thus seeing played out the possibility of, I can't even say it, the recent surgeries that he's gotten, and I think he has another operation this week, the recent comments that Hogan made about wanting to be TNA champion. Because as I said, the scenario is laid out where not only is it a personal vendetta, revenge for Hogan, revenge for Hogan's daughter, but also preserving the future of the company, saving the company, ensuring the survival of the company. All these things in Hogan's mind are laid out perfectly for him to come off in the most heroic way. Now some of you are going to say, why are you even talking about this possibility? Because it's just that. And we can't ignore it. Everyone outside of Hoganville does not want to see this happen. So what does happen? Does Hogan suppress his ego and allow another wrestler, not Sting, to get the revenge that he seeks, that Hogan seeks? Or does Hogan's ego become a charging elephant that no one can get in the way of, which results in him going to Dixie and strongly encouraging her that this is what needs to happen? Oh, but he's not physically able to wrestle. This is Hogan. The same Hogan that knocked 4 guys down one by one with one punch each. Now keep in mind, I said a possibility. You have 2 roads. You have suppressed ego road, in which Hogan allows someone else to handle this. The other road, charging elephant ego road. Hogan feels that he has to do this himself. Which road does TNA take? I'm Taskmart 2002, and that was my TNA Lockdown 2013 analysis. Please leave your comments below. Click the like or dislike buttons. And if you subscribe, I would really appreciate it. If you have any questions about TNA in general or wrestling in general, you can always Contact me on Twitter, TAZMARK2002. And if your comments exceed 140 characters, you can get at me, TazMark2002 @gmail.com. It was a good show. Not great, but it didn't suck. It was a good show. And it will be interesting to see the first live Impact on the road in Chicago and see how the initial process starts, coming off of lockdown and thus leading towards Slammiversary. Which road does TNA take? I'm TazMark2002. Gone.